What happens when a 15-year-old boy, taught to die for his country, is instead offered a chocolate bar by the very monster he was sent to kill? This is that story. It's April 1945, and the world is ending. Berlin is a tomb of concrete and shadow, streets filled with smoke and the echo of orders no child should ever hear. He's been fed a single truth: surrender is betrayal, the enemy are beasts. And yet, here comes a hand with a small, ordinary sweetness. A single choice hangs in the air, and everything he was told to believe trembles on the brink of change. For 15-year-old Klaus Becker, crouched in the rubble of Berlin, that's not a metaphor. The city is a tomb, a maze of shattered concrete and twisted steel. Every street is a corridor of broken facades, every doorway a dark mouth. Dust coats his lips. The air tastes like iron and ash.
Light slashes between collapsed floors, the sky above a thin, distant promise. He moves like a ghost, small against the ruined skyline, fingers sticky on the cold metal of the Panzerfaust, knowing there's nowhere to hide, only rubble and the sound of something coming. The ground trembles beneath him, relentless, a rolling thunder that crawls through cracked concrete and chilled bone. American tanks churn up the ruins, metal treads chewing the city into dust. The sound is not just noise, but a sentence, final and inexorable. The rumble of his own funeral procession approaching. Klaus presses his back into a jagged wall, palms raw on rubble, breath shallow, every inch of him braced for what comes next. The tank's tremor still shakes the bones when Klaus looks down at what he holds, a Panzerfaust, crude and lethal, clumsy in hands meant for pencils and play. It feels heavier than any future he can imagine, metal and promise turned to a sentence. He is 15, skin stretched over ribs, wearing the uniform of a Volkssturm nobody asked to join. The weapon sits awkward across his lap like a bad inheritance, its weight a daily lesson in what the regime asks of children, to carry steel where childhood should be. For a moment, he lets himself think of schoolbooks, then crushes the thought under the weight he must obey. They weren't soldiers, they were boys, pulled straight from classrooms, from chalkboards and playgrounds into a collapsing city that demanded they become cannon fodder overnight. Some were 12. Most had uniforms several sizes too big, boots that rubbed their heels raw, and rifles that were older than they were. Training was a handful of shouted orders, a crude demonstration, and then a Panzerfaust pressed into small, shaking hands. Hunger and fear did the rest. Propaganda filled the gaps where fathers and teachers had once stood. There was no time to grow up. There was only one instruction: hold the line, fight until the end. So when orders came, they had nowhere else to go, and his SS squadron leader's final words echo in his mind. His SS squadron leader's final words loop in Klaus's head like a scratched record. Surrender is betrayal. Death is honor. Kill yourself before you are captured. They land like a verdict, not an order, condemning hesitation, shaming survival, turning fear into duty. Each phrase tightens his throat. Each command makes the Panzerfaust feel heavier in his hands, as if weight can buy honor. He has been taught to measure himself by how far he'll go to avoid capture, to see mercy as a stain. Those words are louder than the rubble, louder even than the rumble of tanks. Another voice in a chorus of propaganda that has been shaping him for years. For years, Nazi propaganda was Klaus's daily bread. Lessons in the classroom, pictures on the wall, hymns at rallies, whispered jokes that hardened into belief. Every image, every slogan narrowed the world until it fit the shape they wanted. Americans as brutes, monsters without souls, a threat that justified anything. It was repetition turned to instinct, a slow kind of violence that lived in his head.
His leader's final command, "Death is honor," didn't come out of nowhere. It grew from that diet. And most poisonous of all were the lies about black soldiers. Not just enemies, but the worst, the final horror to be avoided at any cost.
They didn't just call the enemy monsters. The propaganda painted black soldiers as the worst kind of monster, always shown as snarling, subhuman beasts in crude posters and whispered warnings in classrooms and barracks. Capture by them was framed as a fate crueler than any bullet or bayonet, a humiliation so awful it justified suicide before surrender. For a boy like Klaus, raised on those images, the idea lodged like a stone in his throat. It made every rumble of tank treads sound like the footsteps of that caricatured horror. The fear wasn't abstract anymore, it sat heavy in his chest. He shivers, remembering his friend Friedrich. Klaus shivers, the image replaying like a scratched film. Friedrich, braver in that moment than any of them deserved to be, had raised his Panzerfaust, hands trembling, no words left. The launcher screamed, and the world split. A spray of machine gun fire, Friedrich thrown down like paper against the gray rubble. The memory sits in Klaus like a cold knot, tight and unrelenting, tasting of fear and ash. He can still hear the thin, fanatical promises they'd been fed, the orders that made boys into targets. His breath shortens. Somewhere beyond the broken wall, something heavy is coming, closing the distance. A shadow falls over the rubble like a verdict. A Sherman tank grinds into view, steel treads chewing concrete and brick, sending a small rain of dust and twisted glass across Klaus's boots. The machine is massive and indifferent, a low, mechanical heartbeat that drowns out everything else. The shell-shocked silence, the memory of Friedrich, the taste of fear. For a breathless second, time stops. This is what he was trained to meet head-on. This is what he has to stop. The tank's barrel swings slowly, the crew's voice crackling from a loudspeaker, and Klaus, hands trembling, brings the Panzerfaust up to his shoulder. Klaus steadies the Panzerfaust on his shoulder, knuckles white on cold metal. The rubble blurs. The world narrows to one heartbeat. Loyalty or fear? Indoctrination or the simple, desperate will to survive? Every lesson he learned presses on his chest. He fights for the steady aim, fights to keep from flinching, and breathes out, ready to fire. As he forces the Panzerfaust to his shoulder and breathes through the tremor, a voice crackles through a loudspeaker mounted on the tank. Thin, mechanical, impossible in this chaos. German, clear enough that his name feels small inside it. For a second, the world freezes. Not shouts, not curses, just a tired, human voice speaking words he actually understands. Through the crackle of the tank's loudspeaker, a clear German voice cuts the chaos. Come out. Lay down your arms. You will not be harmed. The words are simple, almost ordinary. No shouted commands, no snarling threats. Just plain sentences offered like a hand. For a beat, the city noise falls away, and only that voice remains, calm and tired. Klaus squeezes the Panzerfaust harder because the offer sounds like mercy, and mercy shouldn't exist here. It's a trick, it has to be. Every lesson, every poster, every shouted order had painted the Americans as beasts, nothing human to trust. So Klaus waits for the snare, for the harsh bark of an enemy ready to kill. But the loudspeaker's crackle carries a different weight. Not the clipped rage of propaganda, not the roar he expected, but a small, worn-out cadence, the kind of tiredness you hear in men who have been awake for nights and carried too many losses. That single, unfamiliar tone lands in his chest like a pebble in a pond, ripples of doubt spreading where certainty once lived. And for the first time, the story he was taught starts to fray.
Klaus hesitates. Inside him, a war ignites, less gunfire than argument, between the iron truths hammered into him since childhood and the small, exhausted human voice coming from the tank. Years of slogans and pictures flash. The SS leader's command, surrender is betrayal. The schoolroom diagrams that made the Americans monstrous. The smell of smoke and Friedrich's blood. His hands go numb. The Panzerfaust feels absurdly heavy.
Der Lautsprechers Deutsch ist plain und tired, nicht vicious. Fear pressed at his ribs. Curiosity, like a thin, dangerous light, cuts through the indoctrination. For the first time, uncertainty tastes possible. In that impossible breath, Klaus feels everything pull at once. The rumble of tanks, the sermon of his SS leader hammering in his ears, the hollow faces of boys who never came back. Propaganda had taught him surrender was betrayal, capture worse than death. But the voice from the Sherman is human, tired, patient, offering water instead of bullets. A different kind of courage rises inside him. Not the neat martyrdom his commanders demanded, but a raw, stubborn will to live. He chooses the unknown, mercy, exile, life, over the suicide they called honor. His hands begin to unclench, the world tilts. He lets the Panzerfaust fall, metal clattering across shattered concrete, a sound that feels like finality. His grip loosens, the launcher skitters away. He pushes himself onto trembling knees and, almost automatically, raises his small hands above his head. Dust stings his eyes. The tank's rumble looms, and for a beat he is more afraid of what comes next than of death. "Don't shoot!" he screams, voice cracking between terror and relief. It rips out of him like a raw animal sound, small, sharp, impossible to own. His hands hang high, fingers trembling on the empty weight of the Panzerfaust, metal cold against his palms. Rubble eats the echo. For a breath, he waits for the shots, the final accounting his leaders promised. Instead, there's dust and the strange, hesitant quiet of something he wasn't prepared for. Not punishment, but a pause. He has chosen to live. Now he waits to see if mercy will meet that choice. For a moment, everything stops. The tank's engine quiets. The turret's rotation halts like a held breath. Dust drifts and settles into an unnatural stillness. Klaus hears his own pulse pounding, taste of dust in his mouth, fingers numb on the cold metal of the Panzerfaust. He waits, each second stretching, the next sound deciding whether this is the end or mercy. 3 large American soldiers crawl out from behind the Sherman, silhouettes against smoke, rifles trained, but not firing. They move slow, methodical, not with triumph, but with caution, scanning the wreckage and the boy. For a breath, silence hangs between them, weapons leveled, hands steady, something like mercy in the way they don't lower their guns. They move forward slowly, boots crunching over glass and concrete, rifles level but not raised. The men, big, careful, scan his small frame, the oversized uniform, the dirt-streaked face. For a long beat, nothing happens. Klaus's hands are raw, trembling. He'd chosen surrender. Now the question hangs in the rubble. Will they see a terrified boy, or still the enemy he was taught to be? Klaus collapses to his knees, every muscle spent, dust clawing at his throat. He is a small shape amid metal and boots, surrounded and alone. He shuts his eyes, inhales the cold, and braces for the shot he's been trained to expect. Waiting for the world to end, waiting for the thunder of rifles, for the last brutal lesson of his leaders. But there is no gunshot. Instead, a canteen is held out toward him, metal glinting in the rubble. He looks up, eyes wide, ready for a bullet, a shout, the end. He takes the canteen. The water is cold and clean, absurdly good. He drinks like someone who has been walking through desert for years. Each swallow loosens the tight knot of fear in his chest. Then one of the soldiers, a black soldier, the very figure from the nightmares painted by his leaders, kneels beside him. Klaus's throat tightens. Every wartime lie surges up, a bitter tide of fear and disbelief. This man, whom propaganda called a beast, lowers himself until his eyes are level with a trembling boy in an oversized uniform, and the movement is almost tender. He offers no weapon, no lecture, just steady hands, a soft, accented German, and a look that says, "I see you," not an enemy to be erased. In that single, quiet kneel, the shape of everything Klaus thought he knew begins to change. Kneeling in the rubble, the soldier leans in and everything shifts. What was a target becomes a face. He sees sheer terror, not rage. Wide, wet eyes, a mouth frozen between scream and sob, sleeves swallowing thin arms. The uniform hangs like a costume on a child who still looks for a classroom instead of a firing line. In that instant, the whole story written into propaganda unravels. This isn't an enemy with orders, it's a scared boy taught to be brave. The soldier's rifle lowers a fraction. Hard training meets a human heartbeat, and pity, recognition, something like mercy lights his tired face. He kneels beside the boy, and in broken, heavily accented German says, "It's okay, son. You're safe now." The sentence is small. It carries no triumph, only a tired, steady kindness, and it hits like something impossible. Klaus's fingers unclench. His breath catches. Every lesson burned into him, monsters, savagery, a fate worse than death, starts to unravel in the space of that one soft syllable. The soldier's voice is not a threat. It's a promise, awkward and human, offered through a language he barely understands but feels in his bones. For the first time since the rumble of tanks began, mercy reaches out to him. That single, gentle act of kindness shatters Klaus's entire world. The monster wasn't real. He had lived on slogans and fear. Now a tired black soldier kneels, offers water, speaks softly, and holds out a steady hand instead of a rifle. The labels, monster, barbarian, subhuman, peel away like flaking paint, leaving ordinary flesh, ordinary grief. Shock, relief, and disbelief wash over him. He bows his head, not to shame, but to the sudden, dizzying knowledge that everything he'd been taught was a lie. In that small human moment, the enemy stops being an abstraction and becomes a person, and that truth will follow him. It was an impossible dilemma for American GIs. Men who had faced panzer divisions and fanatical SS battalions suddenly found themselves staring down ragged, half-starved boys holding obsolete rifles, children pressed into service by a collapsing regime. Trained to shoot the enemy, they now hesitated. Orders and fear sat against something older, an instinct not to murder a child. So units made grim human choices, holding fire longer than tactically sensible, trying to wound instead of kill, shouting in broken German to coax surrenders. Those decisions stayed with them. The memory of a teen they could have killed but didn't would haunt many for the rest of their lives. Sergeant Robert Mitchell of the 3rd Infantry Division remembered it like a scar. 2 teenage boys near Nuremberg, faces shot through with the blank, desperate look of children trapped in a nightmare not of their making. He talked about the sound of the shots, yes, but what never left him were the tears on the survivors' cheeks. Not anger, not hatred, but bewildered loss. He said he would never forget those faces. That image followed men home. It complicated victory. It turned medals into questions. It forced soldiers to reckon with what they'd done
to boys who should never have been turned into targets. It was a moral wound that, for many soldiers, would never fully heal. You can hear it in their letters, see it in the way men who had once moved like machines suddenly went still at the sight of a boy in a uniform, hands trembling, eyes gone soft, a hard jaw loosened by a remembered face. Killing a child, even an armed one, ruptures something older than policy or orders. It undermines the very idea of what they were fighting to protect. That shock stayed with units long after the guns fell quiet, shaping choices in the field and the way those men would live with themselves. The horror didn't stay private. It became a decision in the mud and rubble. Veterans who had killed seasoned soldiers found themselves staring down children. It pulled at something older than tactics, decency, shame, the kind of instinct that says you can't put a bullet through a boy's life just because he carries a gun. So many American units made an informal choice. They would risk their own lives to save these boys from their fanatical leaders. They delayed fire, they took chances, they refused the easy shot. It was messy, costly, and utterly human, a quiet rebellion against the war they had been handed. They deliberately held their fire longer than was tactically wise. Men trained to strike fast breathed slower. They aimed to wound, not kill, deliberately pulling shots low, firing to disable, not to finish. They used every German phrase they knew. Hände hoch, Kapitulation, soft, urgent pleas that sounded strange in ruined streets. Sometimes it was a shouted promise, sometimes a cigarette tossed into the rubble, sometimes a hand extended with water. It was reckless, it was merciful, it was a deliberate refusal to become executioners, and those risky choices are what handed boys like Klaus alive into American care. Klaus was marched out from the rubble, disarmed and blinking against cold light, and taken to an American POW camp near Mannheim. The camp was rows of canvas and tarpaulin, smoker's breath and the smell of coffee, where he had expected only interrogation and cruelty. Instead, a medic cleaned his wounds, a soldier offered a blanket, another pressed a canteen into his hands. The men moved with a hard, professional calm, sometimes smiling, sometimes speaking broken German. Those small, steady gestures, water, warmth, a quiet joke, did more to unmake the stories he'd been fed than any leaflet ever could. His transformation continued, slow and stubborn. Inside the transport truck, every muscle in Klaus's body readied for torture, because that's what he'd been taught to expect. He pictured interrogation lights, cracked voices, boots in the dark, hunger gnawing until his knees forgot how to stand. Stories drilled into him as warnings, as proof that the enemy were monsters who broke boys. He tasted the thin, metallic promise of a cell and heard the imaginary snaps of a life ending slow. So he clutched his jacket, held his breath, and waited for cruelty to begin, certain that surrender would mean punishment, and that mercy simply didn't exist for boys like him. He expected the monsters to tear him apart, and instead, the first thing they hand him is food. 3 meals a day, plain and steady, that feel more like proof than pity. A clean cot under a patched canvas roof where he can sleep without listening for footsteps. Hands that know how to dress wounds, to pull out splinters and sew up ragged skin. And doctors who talk about calories and vitamins instead of interrogation and blame. Each small, practical kindness unravels what he was taught to believe. It doesn't fix everything, but it starts to teach him a new, confusing vocabulary: care, rest, recovery, soon followed by even more unexpected gestures. He and the other boys are suddenly fed beyond belief: extra rations, warm soup, bread, small luxuries they'd been taught were the enemy's special cruelty. Chaplains come through the canvas rows in plain uniforms, not with questions or commands, but with quiet tones, kneeling, asking names, listening to broken stories. Their voices are soft, patient, almost embarrassed at the gentleness. For Klaus, Every polite phrase feels like a small betrayal of everything he was taught. The enemy can be kind. The checks on mental well-being aren't interrogation, they're small salvations. Blankets, a clean bandage, a few words that begin to unmake the lies. They expected monsters. They found orderly men. The American guards moved through the camp with purpose, checking wounds, issuing blankets, answering questions without gloat. Sometimes they were quietly kind. An extra ration handed across the barbed wire, a cigarette offered, a steady voice when a boy trembled. It wasn't sentimental, it was professional. A detached efficiency that, to starving, terrified children, felt like mercy. For Klaus, raised on propaganda that called these men beasts, the small, steady gestures were bewildering, and then transformative, becoming the steady background for the long months he would spend simply watching and learning who the enemy really was. For 7 months, Klaus does nothing but watch, counting meals, the quiet choreography of tents, the way the soldiers move like tired fathers rather than monsters, until watching becomes a kind of education. Every predictable routine chips away at the slogans burned into him, the speeches, the slogans, the faces in the posters. He keeps a ledger in his head of contradictions, a laugh shared over a cigarette, a gentle word to a German prisoner, the steady, unresentful way they patch a uniform or hand over a blanket. If everything he'd been taught about them was a lie, then what exactly was the truth? For 7 months, he watched like a ghost at his own funeral. He saw them share cigarettes, not sneers, but awkward human gestures passed from hand to hand. He heard conversations about wives and farms and hometowns, about barbecues and bills and jokes that had nothing to do with politics. He watched an American kneel to clean a German soldier's wound, heard a camp cook hand over a second helping to a trembling boy. They treated prisoners like people, not trophies. Each small, ordinary kindness felt like a wedge being hammered into the story he'd been taught to believe. It hits him like a slow, painful burn, a truth that starts as a whisper and then sears through everything he thought real. All those small, ordinary moments he's watched in the camp, shared cigarettes, a clean meal, a hand that wound his bandage, begin to stack against the roaring lies that raised him. The men he was taught to hate look tired, human, infuriatingly ordinary. Honor, duty, the glory of sacrifice, they sound hollow now, like slogans printed on thin paper. For the first time, Klaus sees the whole machine that put a rocket in a child's hands, and the realization that he'd been fighting for a fraud turns his stomach. The realization doesn't arrive like a thunderbolt. It settles, patient and corrosive, eating away at everything he thought steady. The uniform that once felt like armor now hangs like a costume. Medals are just rusty tin. The slogans in his head sound hollow. His sense of purpose dissolves into an unbearable smallness. He wasn't a hero. He was a pawn. A child rearranged on a chessboard, moved to buy time for a dying cause. Shame and relief mix in his chest. Shame for what he almost became. Relief that the choice to live was still his. And for the first time, he wonders who the real enemy really is. The real enemy wasn't the tired men in American uniforms. It was the cold, efficient machine that had braided hate into homework, that had taught children how to die and called it honor. It was classrooms turned into arsenals, songs turned into orders, a whole culture that handed a rocket launcher to a boy and wrapped it in glory. That truth lands like a slow, burning weight. Every slogan, every oath he'd believed suddenly meaningless. And with it, his identity shatters. Not a hero, but a pawn. The war outside could end tomorrow. Inside him, a new struggle was just beginning. Who would he become without the lie? The official surrender is ink on paper, a distant radio voice that says the shooting has stopped. Yet for Klaus, it feels like a rumor. The city is quiet, but inside him, everything is noise. Orders replay, faces of boys he failed, the taste of iron and fear. He drifts through rubble that used to be a life, watching other soldiers fold flags and share cigarettes as if the world can be neatly put back together. He tries to feel relief and finds only a hollow where belief used to be. The war is over for everyone else. For Klaus, the pieces of who he is are still scattered on the ground.
Klaus sits on the ground among a ring of other captured boys, dazed, defeated, uncertain of what comes next. Their oversized coats hang from thin shoulders, and broken rifles lie like dead branches at their feet. The city's ruins press in. Smoke, silence, the strange hush after orders stop coming, and each boy looks smaller against that emptiness. Some stare into the distance as if answers might be visible there. Some whisper names, some clutch at wounds, some simply hold still and breathe. The official surrender means nothing to the hollow in their chests. They wait, listening for the sound that will tell them mercy or danger has come. The same black soldier who had first knelt beside Klaus pushes through the circle and walks toward them. He comes slow, deliberate, no swagger, no triumph, just steady steps like a man approaching frightened children. The boys freeze.
Every scrape and breath feels enormous in the quiet. For a moment, it's waiting for a verdict. Then he stops in front of them. They freeze, shoulders coil, eyes hard, fingers clenching fabric, waiting for orders, for a bark, for whatever final indignity the victors plan. Every ragged breath tightens. They brace for humiliation, not the kindness that's about to come. The soldier doesn't say a word. He just opens a small cardboard box he is carrying. For a long-held second, nothing else breaks the silence, just the faint scrape of cardboard and the collective intake of breath. The boys lean in, tension taut. His fingers probe inside, deliberate and careful, like someone opening a gift or setting down a truth. He reaches into the small cardboard box and, with a calm, deliberate patience that feels almost impossible here, pulls out a Hershey's bar and offers it to the nearest boy. Then another, unwrapping each in quick, practiced motions and holding it out like a tiny white flag. The boys, primed for orders or violence, fumble and stare. Some take the chocolate as if it were contraband, others let it tremble in their hands. The soldier doesn't preach, he just gives. Klaus stares at the bar in his hand. Simple. Brown paper, silver foil. It looks almost obscene in a ruined city. Too small a thing to be worth anything, and yet it feels enormous, like a relic from another life. His stomach remembers sweetness the way a soldier remembers a name. His fingers are raw from rubble and winter, and somehow already clumsy with hope. For a long beat, he does nothing but hold it and listen to the silence around him, as if the chocolate might be a trick. Then, slowly, as if daring the world to be kinder, his thumb finds the fold of the wrapper. He unwraps it slowly, fingers clumsy around brown paper and silver foil like a child stealing a secret. The smell hits first, a warm cocoa sweetness that belongs in memories he doesn't have the right to keep. He takes a bite. The chocolate melts, sudden and absurd, and his body reacts before his mind can catch up. Sweetness where there should be dirt, warmth where there should be numbness. For a heartbeat, he isn't a soldier on a ruin-strewn street. He's a kid who once chased cartwheels and scraped knees, and the shock of that tiny, impossible pleasure cracks something open inside him. The first bite cracks something open he has been holding tight for years. A brittle, terrified thing sealed with orders and propaganda. For a heartbeat, he is the soldier who stared down a tank. Then his knees go, his shoulders sag, and the chocolate melts on his tongue like sunlight on frost. He drops the wrapper without noticing. His breath comes in small, ragged pulls. A sound rises from him that is half sob, half laugh, all of it unexpected. The sound of a child finally allowed to fall apart. In the ruined still silence, Klaus breaks down completely. He didn't cry from fear or pain. He cried because, for the first time in years, someone looked past the uniform and the rifle and actually saw the boy beneath it. A boy who'd been taught to be honorable in death, who'd been fed lies and hunger and fear until he'd forgotten how to be small. That little chocolate bar, the steady hand offering it, the soldier's quiet look, none of it was grand, but it was more than he'd been owed. Recognition, mercy, permission to uncoil. So he let it out, a raw, shocked river of grief and relief that had nowhere else to go. He wasn't a soldier to be killed or an enemy to be captured. He was a child to be comforted. Knees trembling, face streaked with grime and old fear, Klaus let the sobs come. Not the rigid, shouted bravado his commanders had demanded, but a small, ragged release of everything he'd been forced to carry. The black soldier sat beside him, silent but steady, offering a cardboard box, a bar of chocolate, a canteen of water, and with those simple, unceremonious gifts gave Klaus something far larger: permission to stop fighting. In that quiet, ordinary mercy, the years of propaganda unstitched, and the first fragile thread of a future began to be rewoven. That simple piece of chocolate was more than food. It landed in his hands like a verdict and a pardon, small and ordinary and impossibly kind. He unwrapped it with clumsy fingers, foil whispering away the last of his fear, and the first bite hit him like sunlight, sweet, strange, almost obscene after months of hunger. Tears came suddenly, without drama, a leaking of everything he'd been trained to hold inside. Shame, relief, the exhausted grief of a boy made into a weapon. In that moment, the uniform slipped from him, not physically, but inside, letting a child surface again, fragile and forgiven, ready, maybe, to imagine a life after the guns. It was the end of the war in his soul, and the beginning of a future he never thought he would have. A sudden, impossible unspooling of everything he'd been taught to clutch like armor. One sweet bite, one warm hand, and the armor cracked. Fear drained out, shame softened. A boy remembered how to breathe. He wept not from defeat, but from relief, from being seen. The enemy who could have killed him had chosen to give him life instead. That small mercy rearranged him. It rewired what he believed about courage and honor and set him on a path that would lead him home, changed, fragile, and quietly alive. Months later, when Klaus was finally sent home, the moment his mother opened the door was quiet, and then everything broke. She saw the boy who had left and the stranger who had come back, a too small uniform hanging off thin shoulders, dirt under his nails, eyes that had learned how to be brave. She dropped the shopping basket. She ran. She pressed him so hard it felt like trying to squeeze all the lost months back into his chest. He stood there limp in her arms, embarrassed, stunned, not yet able to name what had happened to him, while her tears fell fast and loud, the first honest sound in a long time. When Klaus stumbled through the door, ragged and smaller than the mother who had raised him, she fell apart, not just from the terror of almost losing him, but from something quieter and stranger. Shock and a fierce, grateful disbelief as he told her about canteens of water, hot meals, a clean cot, and the day a black soldier handed him a chocolate bar and a word of comfort. The story of mercy cut through everything she'd been taught, and as she listened, she wept for relief, for shame, and for hope, because the enemy had shown him what humanity looked like. It wasn't an isolated mercy. From battered villages to bombed-out city blocks, the same impossible scene kept repeating. Boys who had been written off as corpses showed up on doorsteps, gaunt faces filling out, cheeks pinking, eyes less hollow than when they were dragged away. Mothers fell to their knees. Neighbors stood silent, bewildered. How could a war that had stolen so much return them healthier, even better fed than when they'd left? Those small, stubborn acts, water, rations, a bar of chocolate, began to travel faster than orders and slogans, seeding doubt and loosening the grip of the stories they'd been taught to believe. Across towns and farms, mothers opened their doors to boys who smelled of smoke and surprise, and neighbors traded stunned glances as the very soldiers they'd been taught to hate returned home with stories of cigarettes shared, clean blankets given, and sandwiches handed over in quiet tents. Those stories, letters home, whispered kitchen table confessions, veterans' testimony, spread faster than any Allied leaflet. Personal kindness did what bureaucracy couldn't. It put a face to the enemy and showed ordinary people mercy was possible. That grassroots truth, earned with water, care, and a single chocolate bar, chipped away at the Nazi myth far more effectively than any official denazification ever could. The truth didn't come printed on paper or shouted from a lecture hall. It arrived in the smallest, most human of acts. A cool canteen pressed into a parched hand, a steaming bowl passed across a table, a plain Hershey bar unwrapped and offered without judgment. Those gestures landed harder than any propaganda because they were felt. The water washing away fear, the warm food filling an empty belly, the chocolate melting into disbelief. They were proof, not persuasion. Word spread faster than any leaflet. Kids who had been taught to hate came home with stories of mercy, and those stories quietly began to undo an entire lie. Years later, Klaus, now a man who had eaten a single bar of chocolate and been given permission to be a boy again, did something nobody in his old world expected. He spoke. He traveled to classrooms, town halls, and veterans meetings and told the same simple, unbearable truth he'd learned under canvas tents and among strangers in uniform. Mercy looks like clean water, a warm meal, and a hand offered when you are meant to be killed. Those testimonies chipped away at old myths, reshaped conversations, and turned men who'd been pawns into witnesses for democracy. Survivors of the Volkssturm became steady voices for peace, insisting that a nation rebuild itself on compassion, not revenge. Their lives, snatched from the jaws of a hateful ideology, were forever shaped by an enemy's unexpected mercy, a small human kindness that unraveled a lifetime of lies. That one canteen of water, that single chocolate bar, became evidence you could not dismiss. The people they feared were people, after all. Those boys grew into men who could testify, who taught their children a different story, who stood up for peace and democratic values because they had been offered mercy when their leaders offered only death. The scars stayed, the memories lingered, but so did a quieter inheritance, the conviction that one compassionate choice can begin to undo a whole war's worth of hate. It's undeniable. Training a child to fight is a moral catastrophe, a deliberate theft of childhood. Yet when a soldier steps back from the trigger and offers water, bandages, or something as small as a chocolate bar, something larger happens. Compassion cuts through the smoke and rewrites the script of hatred. Courage is recast, not the ability to kill, but the strength to spare. Those small human gestures dismantled an ideology brick by brick, sent boys home healthier than they left, and seeded a different future. One act of mercy did more to remake hearts than 1,000 orders to hate. In a world consumed by war, it only takes one small human choice to break the tide. One soldier offering his water, one hand extending a Hershey bar, one moment of mercy that unravels a lifetime of lies. Those tiny mercies ripple outward. Boys return home, mothers weep, whole myths begin to crumble, and former pawns become voices for peace. What does it take to choose mercy over vengeance? Courage, yes,
but more than courage, a willingness to see the person in front of you. And what new world can that single choice create? A better one. If you want more untold stories that change how we see history, subscribe.